Hello, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. This is Marcus Sedberry at Baylor University. I'm so thankful for the transformational experience of the NCAA Dr. Charles Whitcomb Leadership Institute. The program is one of the most challenging and rewarding leadership experiences I've ever been a part of. It gave me hands-on strategic planning and career mapping experience. It challenged me to grow personally and equipped me with tangible skills for my professional career. But most of all, it gave me a family of industry experts with shared experiences that I can lean on at any time. Always remember, be loved and be you. Enjoy the episode.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Our guest today is Dr. Karin Lee. Dr. Lee is the Deputy Athletics Director for Internal Operations and Senior Woman Administrator at Ball State University. Greetings, Dr. Lee. Thanks for joining us.
Greetings. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Now, you don't mind if I call you Karin, do you?
I don't mind at all. I hope you would call me Karin.
Okay, excellent. Now, you've been at Ball State, I guess, since 2007, which is, 14 years, I believe?
14 years.
14 years, right? I think the deputy position is relatively recent, but you've been in a senior leadership position for a while there at Ball State. You started off as Associate Athletics Director, began your career in life skills and community outreach at Alabama, and you've been in the industry for almost 25 years now. So you have a wealth of experience and a wealth of relationships. One thing I wanted to ask about right off the bat is the PhD, right? And I know a few people who have done either PhD or educational doctorate, but to get the doctor in front of their name and to get it while working in athletics, there can be a number of reasons to do that. And I wonder for you, the impact that the rigor of study, right, and the mindset of getting a PhD, what impact did that have on your thought process, decision-making process, and leadership process since you got it and now that you've progressed to a senior leadership role here in college athletics?
Well, I will say, Ty, thanks again for having me, that getting the PhD, honestly, at first, because my best friend decided to get her PhD because she's eventually going to be a president of a university. She's a provost now. And I said, wow. And we just started talking one day. And I said, I might eventually want to teach sport administration classes or just get in the classroom. That's all. That's kind of my plan B. And she said, well, have you ever thought about getting your PhD? And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I have a master's. I'm good.
Yeah.
And we started continuing to talk. And I said, well, why not? I love school. Now, I didn't think I want to be in school for 5 years more. But decided that for me, it was a good opportunity and a good time in my life to work on my PhD, because I did get asked after I earned my PhD to teach a couple of classes here at Ball State. I will say that the one thing that, people who have earned their PhD, we always kind of commiserate together and talk about, oh my goodness, I'm working and I have the coursework and this dissertation. And now I even talk with some friends of mine that are working on their PhD and say, just put doctor in front of your name and post it on the mirror. That's going to keep you going, because the dissertation is horrible. Mm-hmm. I will tell everybody that. But once it's done, it's wonderful. You feel what a sense of relief. I will say my PhD courses taught me, which I did realize I didn't do, but really strategic and critical thinking. And most people say, well, you didn't have to go to school to do that. And I didn't. However, working on my PhD just gave me a sense of really how to think more strategically and more critically than what I had been doing. I used to be able, in my opinion, I would feel like, I'm just going to make this decision. I can make this decision. And I really didn't think as clearly as I should. I would think about it. I just wouldn't make it off the cuff. But I really now look at two sides. I look at opinions of others. I really take that into consideration a little bit more. And that's where the critical thinking piece comes in. That's really what helped me, and also helped me become, I feel, a better leader. Because I would think back to my coursework of how I would solve this issue, or when my professors would ask us about different areas, different issues. And my PhD is in organizational management. So really got more into the meat of leadership. My dissertation was about leadership, really got into the meat of that. It really gave me an idea of what it takes to become a better leader. That my listening skills seem to improve because I realize I got to listen. I can't just, hear it. I have to really listen. How to really let people come and think about their problems as well. And I tell the coaches now that I oversee, I don't always want to be a problem solver. I want you to come to me with some solutions as well. So I can give you some solutions. You may not like them. So what's going to happen when you go this way and it doesn't turn out the way you want? So come to me. Let's talk about it. Let's strategically talk about it. And so again, did I have to earn my PhD to have that wealth of knowledge? Not at all. Did it help me increase my wealth of knowledge? It definitely did. And also, it really, when I was able to go into the classroom and teach and really teach students that want to go into sport administration, it really was eye-opening for them as well, because I was an actual practitioner in the industry. I was doing this every day. But I still had to teach at the same time. I just couldn't go in there and say, hey, let me tell you about my day. So I also gave them tools to really think strategically and critically. And if I hadn't really learned that on a different level, I don't feel I would be able to continue to help others, not only gain confidence about critical thinking and just thinking in different aspects, but just also being able to teach people on that level.
That's interesting. I'd like to know if, as you think back to pre-PhD courses and you look forward to what you're doing now, and either the decisions that you've seen that your colleagues that you work with make, or the decisions you made, and where it's almost impossible to do, but could you see where, if this was 6 or 7 years ago, I see what decision I would have made then. But now I understand why this decision was made now. Like, could you tangibly see the difference in terms of your way of thinking strategically and critically about decisions that you make?
I definitely can. I would say when I earned my PhD in 2014, again, it wasn't just a light bulb moment. It took some time to go back. It took some time to talk to mentors again, not only the mentors that were my professors, but mentors in the industry. I really tell you, when the current athletic director, Beth Getz, arrived, she is such a strategic thinker, and she takes time to the point I'm like, Beth, just help me. Let's just do it this way. Yeah. And she has really taught me to, we're going to take a step back, or, hey, you want to do this? Answer these 5 questions. I'm like, oh man, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, right.
So I will say, not only with the critical thinking that I learned, but also with the knowledge that Beth Getz has taught me while she's been the athletic director here, has really changed the whole landscape of how I think and how I approach the situation.
Yeah, which is excellent. Your role, Deputy Athletics Director for Internal Operations. I mean, I think you still have student athlete development. You have and welfare. Yes. You're on a bunch of committees on campus. Diversity, Title IX. You said you have 6 sports. At some point, you had 14 sports?
I had 14 out of the 19 sports when I first got here.
Oh, man. How did you handle that? 14? That's kind of crazy, right?
Not well.
Oh, really?
I'll just be honest.
Really?
And it's really interesting. I was talking to somebody yesterday who at one point had 12 sports in my conference. We were talking, and she was like, you know what? I just feel I didn't do a good job. I owe a lot of people an apology. I said, you know what? I did the same thing, because it's hard, really. I mean, I had, I think 3 out of the 5. No, I don't know. I had majority of the sports regardless. So in the fall, how was I going to the soccer championship and the field hockey championship? And what about cross country? And oh, by the way, we have volleyball over here. I only didn't have football. That's the only sport I didn't have. And I just don't think that I was able to give the attention needed. And now with 6 sports, I really feel like that, when my coaches need me, I can be there. Whereas before, I didn't feel like I could be there.
One of the roles we talked about offline that you do and it's a part of your deputy athletics director position. Maybe not officially a title, but it sounds like what you told me offline was that you're almost a liaison to a variety of departments on campus. When you look at somebody who has relationships with a bunch of people on campus, it could either be a proactive thing to prevent things that may be coming down the line or it will happen, or it could be a reactive thing like, let me go clean this up, or let me go tell these people this is where we're going with athletics. Talk about that being the liaison to key areas on campus.
The first thing I did when I got here, I made sure that I got to know people. I think that's very important. And we may talk about this a little bit later, but really relationships are very important to me. So I just didn't want to know the dean of students when something happens and I didn't know who to call. Recently, it's very interesting because we have an assistant coach here who was a coach somewhere else and said, you know what, it is just phenomenal that we have people here that can help guide us. My previous institution, it was just like the coaches were on their own. And so that's the one thing where I don't want to be I don't want to get the phone call early in the morning. However, and I know if I get the phone call, my cell phone is right here and I have numbers in my cell phone that I can call. So I don't want to wake people up, but they know if I'm calling them at a certain time that I need something, and they're very willing to help. So that was the first piece that I made sure, I've been on search committees for a lot of campus positions. And again, I make sure that we're collaborating. So our health and wellness coordinator was just hired. And then I was on the search for the assistant coordinator. And so it was really great that I was able to do that, because then the first thing, one of her first phone calls was to me and says, hey, can you help me get some athletes over X? I'll make sure that I get them the information. But she knew to call me, which was great, because she said, I wouldn't have known if you hadn't been on my search committee, but B, if you hadn't been on or hadn't reached out and connected with our health and wellness, coordinator. So again, those relationships, I don't want to wait until there's an issue. However, the relationship has been established. So when there is an issue, or if there's an issue, that I know who I can contact because I have those relationships established.
Yeah, those touch points are important when
very important.
Internal operations, from the conversations I've had over the last 4 or 5 years doing these interviews and the people I know who are in the role, it is a lot about the people within the department. Internal operations tell me about if there is one, what you consider your primary responsibility when you are deputy athletic director for internal operations there at Ball State. Or maybe what Beth Getch considers your primary responsibility, right, being the deputy athletics director for internal.
Because my background is the student athlete development, I will say the connection with student athletes, now I think when we talked earlier, we talked about different areas. I also oversee compliance. I've never done compliance. So even when Beth got here, I was like, compliance? Why am I doing compliance? And again, I oversee. I also was able to learn an area, and I'm not an expert in the area because I still have to call our compliance office to talk with them about a variety of things. However, at least I know a little bit more than I did before because before I was like, call compliance. Whereas now I can say, you know what, I think this is the direction. I'm going to call compliance to confirm. So I don't always go in there and say, here's the question, give me the answer. I can say, here's the question. I think this is the answer. If I'm wrong, show me what the right answer is, and then tell me why I went in this direction instead of the other direction. So that's been helpful, but it still goes back to the student athlete development, which is a critical piece. I organize our leadership academy. I organize our student athlete resource group. I organize any programming that comes here. I'm co-advisor with our student athlete advisory committee. So again, all the student athlete touch points are very important and very critical. I also coordinate making sure that we have a really good end of the year survey that all of our student athletes participate once their season has concluded. And I look at the data and I share it with sports supervisors. I also say, hey, you may want to take a look at this, or we may want to talk to the coach about this. Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the coach. Maybe it's something that happened within the team and the coach never knew. So that is a part of my responsibility. So I would say the critical component that I really enjoy, because I enjoy working with our student athletes, is that student athlete development piece. when I meet with recruits, and I even meet with recruits of sports that I don't oversee, I tell them that when they leave Ball State University, they should be a well-rounded individual. It's great that they play X sport and they were all American and they've won championships, but you're still competing with non-student athletes at the end of the day for a job. So what do you have to put on your resume? That's where I come in. I'm going to give you the resources. I can't make you go, participate in the different job fairs or the different leadership academies or the different organizations that we have on campus. However, I can make sure that you have those resources. So when you need something or you do have that kind of light bulb moment that comes on, that motivational spark, and you can say, I remember, Karin came in and talked to us about this, or if I don't know, I'll just email Karin, which I get a lot of that. Karin, I don't know where to go. So can you tell me? Yeah, I don't know either, but hold on. I'm going to text you right back or I'm going to email you right back. Let me find out. So that's a critical component.
Right. One thing about leadership, right? And I've learned this again from talking to a lot of people who work in college athletics and a lot of leaders is that when the pressure's on, you revert to what you may consider your habits, which you are good at. And you just talked about one of them, which is the student athlete and relationships with student athlete. Another one you talked about earlier is relationships, period, around campus. You also offline told me about being resourceful and also having a passion for inclusiveness. Talk to us a little bit about being resourceful, and then we'll follow up and talk about inclusiveness. Like resourcefulness has to help anywhere, in any industry, in any career. At any point, right?
That's exactly right. The one thing that I find is very valuable and very important is collaboration. We cannot do anything, especially on a campus of higher education, without working with our campus partners. So, for instance, we have a program coming up on LGBTQIA+ and allyship. So we have members of the community, but we also have people who support the community. Well, I can't do this program by myself. So I reach to our campus partner, who happens to be a person in student life. And we have an organization on campus called Spectrum that is primarily for the LGBTQIA+ and allies. So I reached out, as a matter of fact, to my diversity and inclusion intern, who's a current student athlete. The Mid-American Conference asks each institution in the MAC to have a diversity and inclusion intern. So I have one, which is great. For the past few years, they've been current student athletes. They want to do this work. So she reached out, and we have somebody, we're going to have a panel. We're going to have a panel with Spectrum. We're collaborating. And they said, oh yeah, we've done this before. We know exactly what to do. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already done for me. So collaboration is very important. We're not on an island by ourselves. And it's very hard on a campus sometimes to prove that athletics is not a silo, because some athletic departments have and we've seen it in the news, when they stay by themselves and try to take on the issue by themselves. That's when we get in trouble. Instead of, reaching across campus and saying, again, with the relationships, hey, I need some help. Where do I go? Or I need you to do this for me because I'm not an expert in this area. I.e., any Title IX issue, there's a form. Our university has a great form that has been developed. I fill out that form, or a coach fills out that form, or the individual fills out that form, and it goes straight to our dean of students, Title IX, student conduct. It goes to all the appropriate parties. It does not go to athletics. Sometimes the dean of students say, hey, I just want to alert you. There's a Title IX situation or whatever situation. Did you know about it? No, I didn't. Okay, let me just alert you of it. And even if I do know about it, I'm still going to fill out the form. And I'm going to then follow up with the Title IX coordinator, who I have her cell number. I'm going to follow up with the dean of students. I have his cell number. And then I'm going to say, okay, it's a university. I need you to then do the regular process that you would do with any student. Because I tell people all the time, I don't want to lose my job. I enjoy my job. So I'm going to follow the correct protocol, policies, and procedures for this campus as a whole.
That ties right back into being resourceful and relationships to make sure you know the people who are in the necessary positions to get things done, and they know you when
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Excellent. So one of the last things I want to ask about here before we wrap, you mentioned inclusiveness, right? And I guess that showed up big time around the country, really around the world in the last year and a half, 2 years. But I think your role, you had a heavy role in it there at Ball State over the last couple of years. And this is something that's important to you. Talk to us a little bit about your philosophy on inclusiveness, but then also some of the things you had to do over the last couple of years there at Ball State.
Yes, great question. Thank you for asking that. So what we call on our campus is inclusive excellence. And I love that term because it's easy to say, oh, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. But our president made sure that we were going to be excellent in the inclusive space. So what the philosophy that I have is we cannot have an organization, and especially an athletic department, that does not focus on making people better. We can have discussions. We can have disagreements, and that's fine. So for instance, we had a Zoom call because of course we were all Zoomed out, but we were not in person after the January 6th Capitol insurrection. And we had both sides represented. Maybe some who thought they didn't think it was a big deal. Some who felt it was a very big deal. But it was a great dialogue and discussion. And again, as we talk about collaboration, resources, I called our associate vice provost for inclusive excellence that I need you to run this because I know what way to go, but I need a neutral party to come in who does this on a regular basis.
All the participants were from athletics. Is what you
Yes. Wow, it was open to all student athletes.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
And we didn't get as many as I thought we would. Mm-hmm. However, you know what? If we had one person, that one person needed to have a discussion.
Yeah, you still have both sides. Yeah.
Right. And we ended up having, I think, about 20, 30 people.
That's a nice number.
So it's still, hey, yeah. I'm good with that. And so she came and was able to have a discussion. And we had a discussion. And some people, I'm sure, were getting really mad, but we had a civil discussion about it. And so I think that helped all student athletes. I mean, everybody, they learned something that night, even if it was, a half of a sentence. Everybody walked away with something. So the past 2 years, we had a student athlete who coordinated a peaceful protest through campus. And then we walked from campus to the courthouse in the Muncie community and had a rally there. And we also have continued to do something, and the Mid-American Conference does this, but called Courageous Conversations. So we had, early on something with our Black male student athletes. We had a Women of Color chat. We're going to do our LGBTQIA+ conversation. Next semester, we're really excited about having a Paralympian on our campus who is visually impaired and has won gold medals. So I'm like, makes me feel, really good about myself because she's done so many remarkable things. And then we're also going to have a conversation later in the spring on what is privilege. And I think that's a very important conversation. As a matter of fact, a student athlete brought it up and said, why don't we ever talk about this? Because white males think, that they're the only ones who have privilege because she's on a sport that's primarily with white males and females. And she says sometimes when we talk about it, white males like, oh my gosh, some of them feel so bad because they're like, well, we're always privileged. But privilege doesn't always mean color. So having that conversation, and when she said that, people are like, I don't get it. And so she said, Karin, I think we need to have a conversation about really what privilege is. I was very happy because that came from a student athlete. I didn't come up with that idea. That came from a student athlete. So I think it's very important. And I also want to say that part of our strategic plan of the goals that we have in our strategic plan, that was the first goal. I shouldn't say it's only one goal. We have an area in inclusive excellence. That area has already been complete in our strategic plan. So in year 1.5, 2, from a 5-year plan, we've already done what we said we were going to do. We have a lot more work to do, but in our strategic plan, we've done what we said we were going to do. And we're going to continue to do it. The next is really working on retention and hiring of inclusive coaches. We need to do, and I say we because it's a collective effort. we all need to do a good job in that. And so that's kind of my next project. I also oversee our Inclusive Excellence Committee in athletics. So we have an action plan each year, and we have coaches, we have staff members, we have student athletes. Our president of SAC is always on the Inclusive Excellence Committee. So I feel that we're doing some great things as far as making sure not only our student athletes and our coaches, but our athletic department starts thinking in a way of, when we say diverse, we just don't mean gender and race. What does diversity really mean? So we always talk about diversity of thought. Beth is very good of saying we need people at the table who have, diverse experiences and diverse thoughts. And hey, we may all look alike, or we may all be coaches, or we may all be administrators. However, everybody's going to come in with a difference of thought. And that's what's very important. And that's how we get the organization moving forward. And that's how we help continue to grow the organization.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to have already accomplished whatever goals you set in your strategic plan. And now we're just executing now. Now we're just doing things to make sure we keep up the conversation, we educate,
That's
and we
right.
have action items to where it's visible to the outside looking in addition to what we see. So I think that's an excellent thing. Well, yes. Karin, this has been an excellent conversation.
Well, thank you, Todd. Thank you so much. This is, when you reached out to me, I will have to say I was very honored because I've heard the podcast.
Oh, really?
And
okay.
I was like, I'm going to be on a podcast with Todd Brown. Yes, okay. I finally made it. So thank you.
Okay, good. I didn't know you had listened to any. I never really know that people listen, so I appreciate that. And I really appreciate you joining us here. It's been an excellent conversation. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
That was Dr. Karin Lee. She is the Deputy Athletics Director for Internal Operations and Senior Woman Administrator at Ball State University. And of course, this is Ty Brown with one question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.